order. First order of business is the approval of the September 27th minutes. Is there a motion on the floor? Mr. Watkins, second by Ms. Grove Allison. Any questions, comments in regards to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. Next is reports for unsafe structures and development summary. Is there any questions or comments? If not, we'll move to receive and file those. Move to receive and file. Next is the zoning case. Want to welcome everybody to the county boardroom for this meeting. Just a little few ground rules for everybody. Knowing that you probably sat through the ZBA case, so you know that there's some of the rules that they're the finders of fact that this board gets to receive. So in our normal meeting rules, we allow for citizen comments. As chair for this meeting, it is my discretion to allow citizen comments. But I can only allow you to speak on these if you chose to spoke at the ZBA hearing, because that is the finding of fact. And I need to remind you, if I allow you to speak, that you cannot introduce any information that was not submitted at that hearing that would be new information to alter this case. So I guess just so I have an understanding, typically we don't have this many people in a room for one of these meetings. So how many people are here on the petitioner side? Okay. And then for the objector side? So did everybody here that was here speak at that meeting? So I can do this a couple ways. Once we get it on the floor and have it for discussion, is there anybody, typically the board, what we would do is open it up if there was questions. We've been presented the findings of fact and go from there. So if there was questions on the finding of fact that staff couldn't answer, or a board member wanted to directly ask that of the petitioner or objector, we would typically allow that. Are there attorneys present too? So I don't know if they would like to speak on the behalf or whatever as the one person for each side. We do have time constraints, so I know the last meeting lasted 4 hours. We're not going to allow 4 hours of deliberation over this. So prior to that, I'm just wanting to ask, is there anybody specifically that would like to have a couple minutes to address the board prior to the meeting, or just leave it open for questions? I'm just trying to have some sort of understanding so I can have an orderly flow without people objecting in the middle of the conversation of the board debate. Is there anybody from the petitioner side that would like a minute, or just answer questions?
We would be willing to answer questions.
Okay. Anybody from the objector side, if you'd like to say a few words? Or just answer questions? Okay. So now understanding that, I'll move forward. And so this was originally recommended by Planning and Zoning. It was denied 1-3 at Planning and Zoning Board. So the motion in front of us today is in the objection mode, so it is not an affirmative. Just to understand that for both sides that it's coming forward. It is actually, if we say yes to the original motion, it is in the negative. So it's reaffirming the ZBA. So I'd ask for a motion and a second to put this on the floor, so for discussion to turn over to Kathy. Jennifer and Sharon. Kathy.
Thank you. As you mentioned, this is a special use request to allow for an overnight accommodation in the R2 medium density residential zoning district, provided that they can meet the requirements of section 7-8 overnight accommodations, and per ordinance that requires no more than 5 rooms or suites of rooms to be rented, and rooms are not to be rented for a period of more than 14 days. The petitioner does propose to offer an entire 1,500 square feet, 3-bedroom, single-family dwelling for rent on a short-term basis through the Airbnb website. The subject parcels are located on North River Beach Drive in Medina Township. We do have an aerial view of the property on the screens here. There are 0 consents and 42 objections on file. The subject parcels and all surrounding parcels are zoned R2 medium density residential. There are 2 adjacent parcels as part of this request. The first subject parcel consists of a single-family dwelling and a detached garage. The second subject parcel is a vacant 50 feet wide lot lying adjacent to the first parcel. The total area of the 2 parcels is just shy of 1 acre. Railroad tracks belonging to the Lincoln and Southern Railroad Company lie to the north of the subject parcel. The Illinois River lies to the south. There's a single-family dwelling located adjacent to the northeast. The backyard of the subject property is separated from that adjacent single-family dwelling to the northeast by a chain link fence, a wooden picket fence, and a garage. There's also a single-family dwelling located south of the subject parcel, adjacent to that 50-foot wide vacant parcel. The entire house is planned to be rented. The use of the property will be similar to that of a single-family dwelling. The petitioner's request is consistent with the surrounding area, as single-family dwellings are the principal land use along North River Beach Drive. Development standards for all overnight accommodations are outlined in the Unified Development Ordinance of the county. The definition of the ordinance includes bed and breakfast, hotels, motels, as well as any type of commercial establishment where rooms are rented at a daily rate to the general public. This includes short-term rentals. The ordinance does require that the operator keep a log identifying the name, address, and phone number of all the guests, and the overnight accommodations not begin operation until a certificate of occupancy has been issued by the zoning administrator. The ordinance also requires that no more than 4 automobiles may be parked accessory to the single-family dwelling for a period of more than 72 continuous hours. This is the same for any type of single-family dwelling. The subject parcels have a combined road frontage of 150 feet along North River Beach Drive, which is a township road. The petitioner states that on average the home is rented to 4 guests, but they may rent up to 8 guests. Per the Institute of Traffic Engineer Trip Generation Manual, 4 guests arriving separately in their own vehicle would generate approximately 10.6 vehicle trips on a weekday. Were the maximum number of 8 guests to stay at the property, the guests would generate approximately 21.2 vehicle trips on a weekday if they each arrived in their own vehicle. The same report cites an average of 9.44 vehicle trips on a weekday for a single-family dwelling unit with a range of 4.8 to 19.39. Therefore, the number of trips for this use is very similar to the trip volume generated by a single-family dwelling. There were no comments received from the Medina Township Road Commissioner. The City County Health Department had no objection. The Medina Township Planning Commission took no action on this request. This request is consistent with the Environmental Corridor Land Use designation of the area, as this land use forum recognizes the value of environmental corridors as recreational, residential, and economic attractions. The subject property's proximity to the Illinois River promotes visitor attraction through recreational and ecotourism opportunities. The petitioner's request is also consistent with the Peoria County growth strategy of generating economic opportunity and stability, as the operation of overnight accommodations would provide income for a local business, and visitors to the area would have an additional option for lodging. As the chair commented, staff recommended approval with the 5 restrictions that are in your agenda briefing. 3 of those restrictions are actually ordinance requirements. However, the zoning board did recommend denial 1 to 3. As an aside, this is the first of
Kathy, not to interrupt you, Sharon is having a hard time hearing you. Can you speak into the microphone a little closer?
I'm sorry. Thank you. As an aside, this is the first of several of these types cases that will be coming forward to you. This case came to us actually as a complaint from a neighbor. Following the petition for this case, the neighbor actually turned in 3 more complaints for parcels being used for the same use in this area. Those 3 property owners have also filed, and those cases will be coming forward to you in it'll be December ZBA and January County Board. Staff has done a search of Airbnb for properties that seem to be used for this use in our jurisdiction, which is the unincorporated area. Of the 533 square miles of the unincorporated area, we found 10 properties which are being advertised for use. 3 of those properties are trying to rent it out for multiple units, but of those 10, there are 4 that you will be seeing in this area. If you'd like, after this case, I do, or before, whenever you'd like to chair, I do also have a map of the locations of those properties.
Maybe we'll have that as a separate subject discussion afterwards. But is there any current questions of Kathy after that presentation? Brian?
Where are the other 6 that, you said there was 10 total? It doesn't really matter today, but it is.
Was that presented in the original
No,
case?
it's not part of that case. It's just an aside that
Okay, that's fine.
I do have a map I can share.
We
So in
can
other
share,
words,
we can share that when we get to miscellaneous,
No, that's
Brian,
fine,
if
that's
need
fine.
be.
I shouldn't have asked that, but anyway, so the people still own the house, and they just rent it out from time to time through Airbnb or whatever they call it.
Right, it's an LLC. They do own the house, and they rent it. Their purpose is to rent it for Airbnb use.
Will the petitioners be living there during the time when they're not renting it out then?
No.
No? Okay, I drove by there yesterday, and just to get a better bird's eye view. I might have some other questions. I'll let somebody else.
Okay. Is there any other questions before? So, as chair, I'll take the privilege to speak for a second. So originally this came with the staff recommendation that this was met all of our land use principles and that they were legally allowed to perform an Airbnb there. There was a 4-hour deliberation from the ZBA. There was a lot of things brought up there, from noise complaints to yard. Both sides answered their questions. There was discussion about a fence. A fence was never allowed. The board, Mr. Eunice, moved to vote on the original recommendation as allowed, even though from the sounds of it there was some members that wanted to look at a fence. I think a fence is a good compromise in this scenario that would allow privacy between the two homeowners. Now, I remind you, this board settles legal land things, not property lines of where fence goes or noise complaints between neighbors. That's a neighborly order that they have to handle. So I think after reviewing the case of the facts that were found, I think it'd be appropriate to change a couple things in the findings of fact. No, sorry, in the 6 stipulations, or the 5 stipulations, but add a 6th, and that there would be the same finding of facts were used that were presented, so that the same finding of facts could be used in the affirmative. But the 2 things to change would be in line item number 3, where it says no more than 8 guests, for it to say no more than 8 overnight guests. And add number 5, the petitioner shall install a solid fence with a height of 6 feet along the eastern side of the property line from the front building line of the subject dwelling to the rear property line. Those were discussed in the ZBA thing, and I find it to be a decent compromise. So if that's the will of the board, we can either vote on as an affirmative, as in the negative, or we can move to have that as an amendment and go forward with that as an affirmative. So the original motion is a denial from the ZBA. As a chair, reviewing the committee, I thought that there was a couple instances of adding a fence would be a solid compromise, and adding that no more than 8 overnight guests would be a solid compromise in the case. It was debated, but they moved to just vote. Mr. Eunice moved to just vote on the original as amended, so that that's why it turned 3-1. I know there was concern talking about the fence, but that was not voted on. So I find that a fence, being that staff originally recommended that this had every legal right to do that would be a good compromise. Might not make everybody happy, but it would be a compromise. That, we can either vote on the negative, or we can have that, what I just proposed, which would be a blue sheet that can be passed around to everyone as the motion. So that would add number 3, instead of just saying 8 guests, 8 overnight guests. And number 5, add, because the last one is the special use can be terminated at any time. And mind you that this special use is only good for as long as the petitioner owns that property. But the last line would be that the petitioner shall install a solid fence with a height of 6 feet along the eastern side of the property line, from the front building line of the subject dwelling to the rear property line.
I just wanted to clarify something procedurally. Right now, what Chairman Dillon, he already stated, but the resolution in front of you is to uphold the ZBA's finding, which is a denial of the permit. And then what's being passed out is an amendment. Are you calling this an amendment?
I haven't made the amendment.
Right.
It would be an amendment.
So this would be an amendment where, as Chairman Dillon said, we can't change the findings of fact, but the amendment would be an approval of the petition with restrictions. So it's adding that 6th restriction and adding the overnight guests. So I wanted to clarify that procedurally, what's before the board is to uphold the ZBA's recommendation of denial. The amendment would be to approve the petition with restrictions. So happy to answer any procedural questions.
Sharon? So we would, if this move, so we can either just vote on in the negative, like Jennifer said, or we would, if this would be an amendment as a compromise, we have to vote on this twice. So you have to vote on it once as the amendment, and then you have to vote on it as the final resolution. So I hope I didn't confuse anybody. Brian?
I always get my directions mixed up when I'm in an area that I haven't navigated before, but isn't that the north side? Wouldn't that be the north side of the property, or?
It's the northeast side. If you'll see on the map here, I mean, it's northeast.
Northeast, okay.
Right, right.
So, right. Hmm.
So,
Okay.
so
And then-
Brian, for the zoning ordinance, the street view is the front setback, and anything adjacent to the street view are considered side setbacks. So we said the eastern side setback line, but you're correct, it's the northeast.
Well, it's really not. We're both kind of wrong and right. It's the north and east, so it's right in the middle. But my second question is, and maybe it's not appropriate, I mean, I know the objectors don't want us to pass this at all, but like, for example, does the person that lives right next door, do they want a fence, or would they rather not have a fence if we do pass it, or is that not even worthy of discussion? Maybe that's not an appropriate question.
It's probably not. It's a legal land, right? Anybody can put up a fence on their property. And
Right.
I don't know. I think a fence was mentioned by the petitioner as willing. I don't know if it got into the findings of the fact of whether the next door neighbor was willing to have a fence. But if it's like any property, if a homeowner wants to put up a fence, as long as they follow their lot line and have it properly installed. I got a neighbor that put up
Okay.
a fence.
No,
I
that's-
wasn't thrilled about it, but they have every legal right to put that fence up. So
No, that's fine. And I don't have any problem with this, supporting this amendment, but can I ask a broader question, because she said there's gonna be 4 more of these cases coming. you know, just going back a little bit, my good friends, the Ramsires, had a bed and breakfast, you know, just right there at the bottom of Mossville Hill for many years, and then they sold it. Are those considered in the same category, or is that different, or?
A bed and breakfast is considered an overnight accommodation, and depending on the zoning district, it may have to come before your board or may not. In certain zoning districts, it's a permitted use, such as in a C2 general commercial. But in a residential zoning district, whether it's a bed and breakfast or a short-term rental like this, it would be a special use. And just to clarify, there's 3 more coming forward.
Oh, 3 more, okay, that's fine. I was just kind of interested, because if all these are coming, I just wanted to make sure we're consistent, you know, with what we do today, and possibly with what we may or may not do in the future, so. That's the reason why I asked that.
Again, my name's Richard Lakaitis. I'm an attorney. I represent the objectors to this special use permit. And my question to Kathy is whether or not staff took into account the 42 people that objected to the issuance of the special use. I don't see that anywhere in the history of the case, if you will, in terms of how this was decided. Because the petition was turned in about the same day as this was issued, same day. So that's my question, is that adequately considered at that time?
Staff considered the findings of fact that are required for a special use, and the analysis of our report did cover each of those findings of fact. We did receive the petition on October 11th, and the staff report had been actually in process for quite some time, but completed on October 14th. We actually wait to count the number of objections for this committee until after the hearing, so we can include anybody that spoke at the hearing that may not have sent anything in ahead of time. So that is where the 42 come in at this point.
Any other questions? Mr. Lakaitis, did that answer? Okay. Brian?
Did the Medina Township Planning Commission actually meet and then just chose not to weigh in on it, or?
So they met and they took a basically a no opinion vote on it, and they asked that the county clarify the status and the ruling. So there was originally, which I don't know if this was presented in the case, correct me or not, there was some, this is our first one, so
Right.
This is new, and you've seen it in the city of Peoria. They've just had their first ones too. So there was initially things about sprinklers, whether or not you had to have sprinklers in it or not. So this was staff learning a little bit about the requirements of this. But Medina Township basically took a no position on the thing, not affirmative, not negative, and their attorney, Mr. Manning, I think, sent a recommendation back saying that it would be nice if the county had more clarification on such a matter.
Okay, I'm going to ask another question, and maybe I shouldn't, but when you rent through Airbnb, do they do a background check on the people?
I know that it's in the reports that they have to run, basically give a government-issued ID. I'll let Kathy touch on all the requirements.
Yes. There was testimony from the petitioner that stated Airbnb does a small background check. It's more like, it's not like a criminal background check. It sounded like they just needed to submit an ID. They have to be an Airbnb user. It has their picture. It's not an extensive background check, but a very minimal one.
Sharon?
Can I make the motion to amend the
Yes.
two changes?
Yes. So moving to go for the blue
Yes.
copy?
This one?
Is there a second from the floor? Yes. Sorry, I keep pulling my mask up and down.
You said initially it was approved and then denied.
So initially, the staff recommended approval. There was a, I believe, 4 hours or over 4 hour hearing,
Close to
around 4 hours.
Right.
Hearing. Both sides presented their case. There was multiple people that presented. It went back and forth. There was only 4 people present that day. The chairwoman was gone, so we had Vice Chair Kite lead the meeting, and 3 other members. So it went back and forth. There was talk of offense, but then member Eunice just said, I'm ready to vote on it as is, and they vote on it as is. So staff recommended approval. The ZBA said no, but they didn't vote on having the fence or anything else. They voted on the original amendment. They used the same finding of facts in opposition that were presented as positive. So as both attorneys would be aware, for anything vote to happen here, if we would overturn it, you have to provide finding of facts. The finding of facts that would be presented today, if this amendment passes, would be the same finding of facts, but using them on the proponent side. If it fails, the same finding of facts will be used as the negative. So the finding of facts aren't really going to change because they can be used either way. That doesn't always happen in cases, but being that this is the first case ever for this, it's consistent with our land use plans. Is that?
Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying. I was confused as to how it was approved and then denied. And then the other thing I wanted to state is if there are more to come before us, I don't think we're setting a precedence in any way because each one would be its own unique beast.
Correct.
That's all I had.
So Sharon has a motion. Is there a second for the blue copy? Jennifer? So the blue copy, and both attorneys, I believe, received the blue copy. Is there any questions on the blue copy more before I would call for a vote?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, if there's a yes vote on the motion to amend, does that mean you're approving the resolution as presented?
We're moving to move with the new stipulation. So right now so original motion to get it on the floor was to reaffirm the negative vote from the ZBA. This is a motion. Now I have a second motion for an amendment, and this is the amendment adding the 2 stipulations about overnight and the fence. So then we have to vote on this. If this passes, then we have to vote again for the for the new amendment, because this amendment's taking the place of the first amendment. If this fails, then we would be voting on the original motion as presented. I know that can sound confusing, but that's the proper procedures for. I don't know if that. So this would be to go back to the original finding of facts of the ZBA staff with 2 more amendments, which would be the fence and the stipulation of overnight.
This is amending the recommendation of the staff.
This is amending, staff's recommendation was in the affirmative. The ZBA's recommendation was in the negative. This is putting a positive back over the negative. This is going back to the staff's original recommendation, but with more provisions. So the original one with us had 5 restrictions. This changes the word in 3 to make overnight, and then this would add the fence requirement. Yeah, did I say it right? I mean, and if we want council to reaffirm.
I'll just say the blue sheet is a substitute. If you want to say instead of an amendment, I mean, it works the same way. But the first vote, what Chairman Dillon said is correct. The first vote is just whether or not the committee wants to even entertain the blue sheet substitution. So they'll have a vote on whether or not that's even going to come up for a vote. And then the second, if they approve or vote in the affirmative to entertain the substitute resolution, then the next vote would be to actually adopt the substitute resolution. Is that clear as mud?
Okay, is there discussion on the blue copy? Brian?
I don't think I understood it at first, but now I do. So Airbnb actually owns the property now, is that right? Or
No.
that's what what it says.
All American,
All American Airbnb, yeah.
that's the name of the LLC.
So they actually own the property.
The LLC owns, I believe the petitioners are over here, so it's individuals own the property. It's like they just put it on Airbnb or VRBO to lease the property. So, but the name of their company is All American Airbnb.
So what if some citizens like us still own the property, and all of a sudden Airbnb doesn't want to have anything to do with it anymore? Can they bring another company in under the way this is set up, or?
I mean, just because Airbnb is in, I guess, their LLC name doesn't mean it's attached to Airbnb. I know of VRBO, there's Airbnb, and I'm sure there's some other websites where you can lease properties from. I mean, technically they could rent it privately and not even go through this, but they are now entering into all these agreements.
Okay.
And I think the key to the last one is special use number 6, which is special use permit, which is all these restrictions, may be terminated by the zoning administrator upon violation of the above restrictions per section 20-3.5-9 of the Peoria County Unified Development Ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
So this special use can be revoked, and it's only good for the owners.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any questions to the blue cop amendment? Sorry to make this so confusing for everybody, but does everybody understand we're voting on the amendment in the affirmative? Seeing no hands, those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous ayes. Now moving to the motion as presented, as substituted, as amendment. So this is now making the blue copy the final resolution that will go to the board. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. So the amended resolution will go forward, which there's still one more step in this process, and that is the second Thursday of the month at 6 o'clock at the final county board meeting, where the whole board will take a vote on it. Next up is miscellaneous. If this is where Kathy would want to answer Brian's question, since it's outside of the case from original.
Right. Brian, we can pass out a map here that shows the location of those 10 properties. Can I have one of those back? As I said, 3 of them have multiple type rentals on it. For example, the star that says 7 and 6 up there in your area. It's one parcel. They're renting, from what we can see on the Airbnb website, they're renting a part in actually a converted ag building and part in the house itself. So it's one property, but they have 2 rentals on there. As I said, there's 10 parcels. The other 2 stars, number 8, it's one house, but they are advertising as renting 4 rooms separately. Number 1 is also one house, but they're renting it either as the full house or just 1 bedroom. The others seem to be single, advertised as a single rental for the house. We have not received any complaints on any of these. And as I said, our first complaint was this one, and we then subsequently had 3 more along River Beach Drive. But the other are scattered over the county a little bit. We did survey 13 other Illinois counties. Most don't address Airbnbs at all. Those that do address them treat them as they would a bed and breakfast or an overnight accommodation as we do. And most have never had a request for the use. It's just kind of, we don't see it.
So, in those other counties, they can just do it freely as they wish, or?
They've not had any complaints, and they're like us, they treat it as a complaint basis. They're not aware of any uses in most of those counties that we've seen.
And Brian, another topic of conversation I had with Kathy leading into this is I know she's talked to other counties in the city of Peoria. More than likely, we will not be looking to charge a registration fee. City of Peoria charges one. It's nominal. I think, what'd you say, $75, Kathy?
It's 100, is that correct, Taylor? You talked to them? Yeah, it's somewhere close to that.
More than likely, it's probably not even worth staff's time once we have a special use to even register these as on a permit basis. So that's not something that we'll probably be looking to do unless this board adamantly believes that you need to have a registration process. But technically, they'll all have to go through a special use to operate on that, which the county would be then fully aware of what properties are being used in this capacity, if that makes sense. Any other questions for Kathy? Sharon? We're in miscellaneous, yes. We're in miscellaneous, yes.
I'm just wondering, I've been keeping an eye on some of these properties that we're talking about, demolishing. They've been referred to the state's attorney's office for the demolition order. Do you know how long that takes? Just a general idea. I have one person in particular that's lives next door that's very concerned about when that's going to happen.
I think I'll refer that to the state's attorney's office.
How long the process takes to effectuate the demolition? To actually have the building come down?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, once we have a court order, do you know?
Right,
how-
so we are waiting for the court orders from the state's attorney's office. I'm not sure how long that will take. Once we acquire those, there's several more steps. We have to bid it out, both for the demolition and for asbestos testing, and then demolish the property. So it's several months after we receive that. Hopefully we'll be able to get started on those. We do have the list for the grant completed, and we have some backup properties for those as well if ownership changes. I know we have quite a few on that list.
Like Kathy's, any other thing under miscellaneous? Like Kathy said, we'll have some more of these coming and treated as individual cases. We will have, was it 4 cases next month, or just how many come actually to the board?
To the
To-
board
Yeah.
for with this case, we will have just this case.
No,
for-
I'm saying, sorry, I was just getting ahead of myself
Oh.
here and saying for next month I got,
Oh, yes,
for the November hearings, I know we have one for Raber Packing Company.
right.
There's a James Agnolte on a few of them, and then a Grace Catering.
Yes. So the Agnoletti is a special use. The Raber Packing is a rezoning, so those will come forward to you. We will also, we're expecting some Met Tower filings for the, out by Brian's area for a proposed wind farm, maybe a few years down the road. They just want to set some meteorological towers up to measure the wind. So that's coming forth. And then, as I said, we had 3 filings for further Airbnbs that will go to the zoning board in December and your committee also the end of December.
So no Christmas break for this committee. Any further questions, comments under miscellaneous? So I'd just ask, do both attorneys then understand the next process, though? Okay. Seeing none, meeting adjourned.